I am so grateful that you have joined us today at this rather early hour in Calgary and some of you in Vancouver, and for a very special breakfast with Ron and Deb. I sit in a very unique place filled with gratitude and pride. Gratitude for the leadership we have around us and the leadership at the Institute, and proud of the over 65 groups of Weizmann scientists who have pivoted their research to focus on various aspects of solving this crisis. And we do know two things: that science will have the answer. And the other thing is, during this really crazy time, predictability is something that we need to hold on to, something that gives us some sort of confidence about tomorrow. And, you know, at the beginning of this crisis, we all jumped in as leaders and did what we had to do, make sure family, friends, loved ones, everyone was taken care of, pivoted. And then there's this time that we're really not quite sure about what tomorrow will bring. And predictability is something that I'm grasping onto, and the focus of our conversation today, how science and business can give us some sort of predictability and hope for the future. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing someone who really needs no introduction. Everybody knows and loves the amazing Deb Yedlin. What you may not know is that we have been blessed with Deb's leadership as part of the Calgary chapter for many years, and we've shared many special moments on campus at various global gatherings, and I am honored to have Deb as part of our leadership and a privilege to call her friend. So Deb, thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan, and welcome everybody. This is truly an honor for me to be able to facilitate this conversation this morning. I'd like to just briefly introduce Professor Milo before he starts his presentation. He earned a BSc in Physics and Math at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and a PhD in Biological Physics at the Weizmann Institute of Science. And he was the first fellow in systems biology at Harvard Medical School before joining the Department of Plant and Environmental Sciences at the Weizmann Institute. Now, when he was a postdoc at Harvard, he created an online shareable resource that grew into a massive online database called BioNumbers. And BioNumbers allows scientists around the world to search bio-based data. And this approach is being used to create a, quote, sort of coronavirus by the numbers, which is a key collection of key properties known about the virus that can be quantitatively measured. You know, we're talking about science, we're talking about biology, and we're talking about math, and the confluence of these three pieces that are going to come together to solve our challenges. Now, Ron's research in collaboration with two others has resulted in this presentation of a development of a model called the 10-4 model, not for CB radio users, but in terms of how we reopen the economy and minimize the impact in terms of where we are today from a lockdown perspective and future infection rates. So it's biology, it's math, and it's a very interesting approach that potentially could result in a 4-day work week. We don't know. And so we're really fortunate that Ron will be able to share his research with us this morning and give us a presentation. Then we'll have a Q&A. I'm sure you can use the Q&A function, the chat function, to ask questions after his presentation. There was a great op-ed in the New York Times about this process, and he was interviewed on CBC's The Current, and it was referred to also in an article by Harvey Schachter in the Globe and Mail. So I'd like to turn it over to Ron. Boker Tov, Toda Rabah, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much. Just to make sure I'm not speaking into cyberspace, just raise your hand to see that you hear me. Okay, good. It's also kind of a shalom. And I guess the one thing you didn't mention that I did during my postdoc was to come to Calgary and to enjoy the warm hospitality of my family in Calgary and to have a wonderful time. And it's something I remember. I wish it was closer to be able to hop over more easily, but it's something I remember very, very fondly. So to tell you more about our efforts, let me share with you a presentation. Feel free throughout to ask me questions. I don't want to make it, too jargon-filled. And also, I would say it's the kind of problems that, in comparison to some other problems I'm dealing with, which are, very deep scientifically, here there's many, many different aspects that I'm guessing many of you, each one from their own perspective, could bring, important perspectives. So feel free to ask questions, and I hope it would be, I'm pretty sure that it would also be a learning experience also for me. So let me share that. Although they tell me the host disabled my ability to screen share. So I can either try to improvise or the host will give me access.
So
we're fortunate to have Jan here, our host of Everything event. Thank you,
Ron,
Jan.
tell me that you can try it now.
Okay, thank you.
Magic. Thanks, Jan.
So the Zoom magic works. Okay. So I'll be telling you about this suggestion to use a cyclic exit strategy, which I'll explain, in order to be able to balance this very, very tricky situation we are at, where on the one hand, we want to suppress the COVID pandemic, and at the same time, allow economic activity, which is crucial, I would say, not only from the economic perspective, but also from the humane perspective. So people not only need to make sure they have income for the families, especially in countries or in locations or in socioeconomic strata that do not have a long-term income waiting for them already, but also say from the welfare of people as well. And the work I'll be presenting started together with the group of Uri Alon, which was also my PhD mentor. So I always loved working with him, and I feel like as if we're in a scene from the Blues Brothers of going back to work after many years that each one did their own gig. So we're going back into working together. And it's also in collaboration with epidemiologists and with economists, and you can see some of the names here. And so the raison d'etre, motivation for all this thing, comes from the fact that we're worried about a second wave once you exit lockdown. And I guess this is not something that would be foreign also for people now, considering that in Canada, there is a serious worry that once you exit lockdown, because either things are better managed or because just the economic realities are such, there's a worry that, again, there'll be increase in the number of people getting infected, and therefore there'll be a need for another lockdown for an unknown period of time. And I think that could be really catastrophic from many, many perspectives. Already now the situation is very dire, but it's known also from, behavioral economics that once you give people back something and then you want to take it once again, it's much worse than when you took it in the first place. So this is really something, and predictability, as Susan was saying in the beginning, is a key issue. So here comes the following suggestion. Even though it's not as good as, going back to our normal, there's a strategy where for an intermediate period of time, for how long we could discuss afterwards, we'll be working in a cyclic strategy, breaking the time into 2-week cycles. And in every 2 weeks, there'll be 4 days of consecutive work. And then people would get into a 10-day lockdown, kind of like the kind of lockdown that I guess you experience right now. This would be achieving about 40% of the work days. So if in 2 weeks you have 10 work days, you'll be working at 4 out of those 10. You could have longer hours, etc. So maybe productivity could be somewhat higher. And the idea is to try and test it for, say, for 2 cycles, for 1 month. What is the logic behind this? So we could test it under different scenarios, as I could explain a bit further. And it seems that under a very large range of parameters and situations, according to what is known about both the virus and the situation in different countries, this could continue the situation where there's a decrease or suppression of the disease, while still giving you the partial economic activity. And the reason why to choose, say, 4-10 versus something else, and the whole logic behind it, is based on a vulnerability of the SARS-CoV-2 virus and the progression of the disease. What is this vulnerability? There's something known as the latent period. The latent period is a period of time after a person gets infected in which they're still latent and they're not infecting others. This is on average about 4 days. There's variability across the population, but this is the characteristic number. That means that if somebody, it could also somewhere between 3 and 4 days. If somebody is infected at work, if there's a 4-10 schedule, even if they're infected on the first day of work, they'll be spending most of the working days not infective, and most of their infectious period would be in their lockdown when they're at home, within their household, with much fewer number of interactions. And by the time they go back to work 10 days later or 2 weeks later, they're out of the infectious period. Unless they're under very severe condition, in that case, in any case, if there are symptoms, of course, the person should be isolated and should seek, the relevant medical treatment, or just isolate until all symptoms are gone and they've been tested and we know they're not infectious anymore. So this is the key concept. We could test this under many different scenarios. So this, for example, showed you one example of how we could analyze this thing. So you can see on one axis how infective are people during work days, what's known as R, which is the number of people that would be infected by a person that got infected, and what's the R, the level of infectiousness under lockdown. And it's a range of parameters, and we could look according to what we know about European countries, about Asian countries, about what happens in different situations. And you can find it under a very large range of parameters. It seems that like 410 would still achieve a suppression of the infection process. There's many uncertainties. I want to be clear here. It's not that it's very difficult for anybody to guarantee. What you can do is try to do the best science and best analysis, and you can try and build a strategy that's also adaptive in the way that I'll be discussing further, such that you can try it for, say, 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and according to the situation, you can decide how to move further in this balance between work and suppression of the disease. There's a way to do it even better in many situations, and especially for companies that want to work more days, or for the school system, and that is to break the population into 2 groups. Let's call them Group A and Group B, where Group A would be some household and Group B would be another set of household, say by family name or street number or whatever you want. And Group A would be working on 4 days and then get into lockdown on 1 week. And then in the other week, Group B would be working and then get into lockdown. By that, you can achieve many more work days for the business in like these 2 kind of shifts, if you like. You can even consider 3 shifts if you also want to work in weekends. And by that, you can expect that companies and businesses would achieve much more activity. Of course, I should say, of course, from lockdown, people working from home can still do their work from home. Obviously, that could also work. And I don't get into all the details, but that seemed to be able to suppress the spread even more strongly. And therefore, you have a more robust solution. And the reason for that is also because it reduces the density. Let's say in the classroom, now that you have half of the kids, because the density is lowered, it's much easier to achieve physical and social distancing, which is part of the way to suppress the spread and to decrease the number of infections. As I said, the approach is also adaptive. What do I mean by that? I mean that if you start with a 4-10 cycle and you find that that's not effective enough in order to suppress the disease, you can say, okay, we're going to test it for 4 weeks. And then if things would not be effective, we could move into 2-12 cycle, meaning only 2 days for Group A, and then maybe another 2 days for Group B, or maybe do more groups. That means that businesses know that even if this would not be as expected, they would still not face the situation that, again, for an unknown period of time, you have some extensive lockdown that is you're not able to plan for it in any way. So it's not very I think, probable that we'll need this to go to less days. But if we do, we know we have a plan. From the other side, if we see that things are very effective and you're very effective at suppressing the disease, you can move into more work days, say to a 6-8 cycle, meaning working, say, Monday to Friday. And you can achieve more work, or it's Sunday to Friday in Israel. I guess you'll decide what it is in Canada. And therefore, you can achieve more work days and find a better balance between suppressing the disease, keeping that, and having more economic activity. So getting near to wrapping up.
That bird can only be in Israel, right?
What?
The bird that I'm hearing is only in Israel, right?
Yeah, for your next visit, there's a beautiful birding tour of the Weizmann campus being led by a former student of mine. He's amazing. You could learn so much about what's happening here in terms of birds. But before you'll be able to do that, we have to find a solution. So just to show, this could be relevant in several different strategies. It could be, as I shown here at the top, as an exit from lockdown strategy. Another option, like some countries, say in Europe or in Israel, already exited the lockdown. But then we're very worried about a second wave, which is seasonality driven, meaning that here in the summer, it seems like there's the virus tends to spread less, but when autumn comes or winter, there's all sorts of indications that the temperature and the humidity would make it more effective in spreading in the northern hemisphere. And therefore, it might be relevant to apply it, say, as part of winter break or extended winter break. So it might be relevant as a strategy for those months that are, like, once you see that there's starting to be an increase, you already tell businesses, this is the plan. It wouldn't be something you're unable to prepare for. It would be kind of like an extended Christmas break, and be ready, and it's going to turn into this 4-10 strategy. And the third option is to turn it into the new routine, the new normal, until a vaccine would be developed. And I think different countries would have to decide what is correct, right for them. So a few, I think, advantages of this is that this strategy could be a step in building trust and confidence, such that both people and the businesses know what they're facing and how it's being done. I think it's also equitable, meaning it's not that just some sectors that, you know, could work from home, they're able to get their income, but other sectors are not able to do anything. And therefore, people in those sectors are very problematic in terms of being able to feed their loved ones or to get some income. So it's equitable in that sense. It could be applied, as I'll mention in a minute, at different scales, company, school, town, entire country. And it's something that one could, I think, adhere to much more easily than a complete lockdown. So a strategy such as this is now being done in Austria and Germany, and it's working in schools. So that's one place where this is being applied. The mayor of Mexico City has decided for the whole region of like 20-something million people, as part of their exit from lockdown, they're now in this red status. And when they want to exit into what's in here as the orange, they're planning to do it through the 4-10 cycle. And that's interesting. I think it was brought to the attention of the mayor of Mexico through the friends of Weizmann that were listening to the talk that Susan arranged as part of like an event for Canada to where people were invited from around the world. Some of our friends in Mexico were listening to that. They were passing on the information we gave to the mayor of Mexico, which decided to adopt it for their plan. So I think, well done, Susan, for helping spread the word.
Just by the way, Susan doesn't do anything without a lot of people around. So there were a lot of people who were involved in making that happen. Maybe my name was on it, but thank you.
Okay, thank you all for being involved. In terms of the business world, so just this week, MasterCard, after I had discussions with them, decided to adopt this for the return to office plan. And they just communicated that to all their employees. So we're talking about quite a few employees in several locations around the world. also Senao, which is a big Spanish engineering company. And I know that in Toronto, Delvenia is also thinking of this as their part of their exit from lockdown. And maybe some of the people here could add more details on that. And I'll just mention in the end, this is all made in order to share. It's not something that we're looking into just as, you know, as a paper, a scientific paper. It's really something that, you know, for at this time of emergency, we really try to collect all the different minds at the Weizmann and around in Israel to try and find about the correct balance and the best possible strategy. And we built all of those tools in order to be able to communicate it to in policy discussions, to the business world, all sorts of interfaces in order to be able to understand this better and to try to adapt it into the relevant situation. And so with that, I'll be happy to see the perspective of, you know, how does it look from your side of the world? Thank you.
The one thing lacking with Zoom presentations is we need to unmute and say thank you to Ron before we go to questions. Thank you, Ron. Take it away, Deb. And Ron, we want to see your face, so stop sharing. Thanks.
Sure. Where is the stop sharing? I somehow don't see the stop sharing just now. Somehow it's behind here. Can the host do the stop sharing on my behalf for a second? I somehow don't have the...
Jan, make your magic. Deb, you're on mute.
There we are. Okay.
Okay, got it. Yeah, no problem.
Good.
No, yeah.
Yay.
So thank you. That was so interesting. And I'm encouraging everybody to submit their questions on the chat function so that we can ask Ron those some more follow-up. But to start things off, do all businesses have to be on the same cycle in terms of 4 and 10 in any given jurisdiction? How does that work? Does it matter, or do they have to be coordinated?
Yes, so it depends how you want to implement it. Ideally, it would be the same 410 for all the companies. And by that, you'll be achieving the least mixing and the most effectiveness. If you start doing it in Group A and Group B, as long as you keep it by household, each company can be independent to do it on, to break up their company to whoever wants to be at Group A and Group B in terms of the week.
What has MasterCard done? Are they going to do Group A and Group B, or are they all going to a 4 and 10 model?
No, so they're doing Group A, Group B, but where each group does a 410 model, okay? It's just staggered. It's like 410, and then in the other week, it's 410 for the other group. So that's what MasterCard has decided to do. Let me just be clear. They also have like a group, I think they call it Group C or something, which are the essential workers that they just have to continue to work as usual, because I guess in order for all of us to be able to use our credit card, etc. And they're keeping them in a different, what's known as a different capsule, meaning they make sure that they don't mix with Group A or Group B physically. So they separate their offices that way. So
now, has this been utilized by any healthcare delivery systems, hospitals, clinics, or is that again something different? Yes, so I know that we had an interesting email from UCLA where a director of a facility there or department there told us that actually they've been implementing something very similar that they thought of independently, and when they read about the work, they said, oh, that's great. That's exactly what we needed. And that's what they've been implementing in UCLA for some of the doctors. And the main advantage, he told us, for that was that they knew then very clearly what to do in the case when somebody got exposed, because then they knew very quickly, which part of the group, which were working closely with them, have to be, to go for a 2-week quarantine, and the others could continue working as usual.
they had more than 2 groups. I think they had 3 or 4 groups together with interns, etc. And they said that this is, you know, exactly what they've been using.
So you can use, I guess the question is too, is that you've got group A, group B, could you have 8 groups of group 4 and 10, or would that even be possible to coordinate?
Yeah, so I think 3 or 4 groups is what makes sense within a framework of 2 weeks.
Now, one of the things we've been all focused on is school, whether it's K to 12 or the university system. How can this strategy be utilized in the school system and in the university system when you have, you know, a lot of students in close proximity?
Yeah, so it's a real dilemma. One thing you can do is if you do this group A, group B, it means that in every group you'll have half the number of students. And then the idea could be that this would be synchronized together with the businesses, such that household in which the parents go on group A, the kids would also go on group A and go to school on those days. And during their lockdown, their parents would also be under lockdown, and then they'll be spending time at home with their parents. And then they could do homeschooling, or they could do some online classes and things like that.
So just define for us what tell us how you define lockdown. As I think it means a few different things to different people. And I know Israel has some very different guidelines than the rest of the world for their quarantine. So what do you suggest?
Yes, so I think, you know, it's probably not for me to define in the sense that, you know, it's really the health authorities together with epidemiologists, and, you know, one should see, you know, what's the standard in that country. What we are doing in our analysis is we're taking the values associated with lockdown in different countries, different cultures, and we're plugging that and scanning that in order to find the robustness of the model. Because countries, as you say, are different in how they implement, and also in terms of their needs. You know, some societies, you know, live in denser situations, not as dense, different cultures, different structure of the houses, climate, and all of those issues.
So one of your slides talked about summer seasonality, meaning that the transmission isn't as rapid as it is when we're all locked inside, especially in colder climates. But, you know, I think everybody sees the pictures of people at beaches and thinks, oh my goodness, this is terrible, and it's going to make things worse and sort of, you know, be a catalyst to that second wave. You're saying we shouldn't be as worried about that.
So I think it's important in this, you know, especially in this time, but also in general, like, we can't do things in a dichotomous manner of like black and white. You know, saying that, you know, temperature is something that, like, on the higher temperature, there's less infection. People should not interpret that as meaning that they could go and do whatever they want as long as they're on the beach. Yeah. So it's a much more fine-tuned message, where on the one hand, we expect that, you know, other things being equal, seasonality would make the problem not, you know, simpler during the summer, and we should worry more when we're entering into autumn and winter. And at the same time, also in summer, we should, you know, things like mass gatherings. We know from many very sad examples from around the world, there could be super spreader events, super emitters. So we should be careful with that.
Are you concerned that we could see a second wave sooner than what people are expecting, and that could cause further challenges from an economic and from a healthcare perspective?
The short answer is yes. Yes. Or let's say, I would say definitely yes, but now the question, it's not enough just, you know, whether I'm worried about it or not. What can we do about it? And I think what we could do about it is try to have a plan. You could say we should have had a plan from the beginning, but let's say that's how you say water under the bridge. You know, we could discuss that some other time.
Yeah.
But especially now, when we're all in our houses, have time to think, we have to think about a plan when we go out, how to handle if there will be such a need. And I think the chances are pretty, you know, it's more of a question of when rather than whether it would happen. So we should have a plan.
Just a final question. Has Mexico City agreed, or have you asked them to share their data as they apply the the 4 and 10 model to their openings up strategy? I mean, that's a very big city, and it could present some very interesting data for you. Are they going to share that data?
So we actually asked that from all the, like say MasterCard and Delvenia, etc. We've been in touch with them so that they'll be sharing the data. With Mexico City, I'm not sure it would be as easy to get the same kind of data that we're expecting. So we'll be following the kind of statistic they have. But I have to say, I feel also like they'll be doing whatever they can to collect the data. I feel more, let's say, you know, more freely to ask, you know, MasterCard and Delvenia when they're implementing it to collect data in a very delicate manner in the way I need for doing our analysis down the line. Whereas what I can expect from, you know, I think Mexico City has many other challenges to deal with right now, but, you know, we'll try to collect whatever information would be available.
So my last question, you know, we've been hearing from Bill Gates and many others that this is one pandemic that we're dealing with. There's likely will be more. Is your strategy pandemic this specific to this pandemic, or do you see this as being applied as we deal with other pandemics that arise in the future?
I think this could be relevant also for future pandemics. This does make use of the latent period, as I mentioned, the vulnerability of the pandemic. And we have to see what would be also the characteristics of any other pandemic that would come upon us. But it's not uncommon to have something of that sort. So I think experience that we'll gain with testing this and analyzing it and seeing what happens in the real world where companies or counties implement this would definitely make us better prepared and more knowledgeable on how to plan for the future.
On that note, I want to say thank you very much on behalf of all of us for giving us your presentation. It was terrific. And thank you for answering all our questions. And now I'll turn it back to Susan to close things off.
Thank you so much. And, you know, I often say the two words thank you are small words and they mean so much. You know, Ron, you're giving us something to grab onto. And by the way, last night I got a text from the head of one of the larger Bay Street firms that they were going to go 1 week. And now that they've heard more about this, they're going to implement the strategy. So stay tuned for that. Deb, thanks always for the way you masterfully moderate a conversation. I'm honored and thrilled that our entire Calgary leadership is with us this morning, headed by our fearless leader, our chair, Darlene Switzer Foster. Thank you all. And, you know, Ron's research is an excellent example of what Weizmann stands for: curiosity-based research, a multidisciplinary approach. And on that note, I just want to share with you that we are in the midst of a very exciting crowdfunding campaign. And the Calgary chapter is 90% of its goal. And we have an anonymous donor who has agreed to match 3 to 1 all gifts coming in this week. So this will help move important research forward in all of those labs, the 65 labs across the Institute campus. So grateful to all of those of you who have supported, and encouraging to reach out and help Calgary reach that goal. We're very, very close. So thank you all. Please continue to be in touch. Sign up for our weekly updates so that you hear more about what's happening on the campus. And thank you once again to Ron and Deb for this special morning with us.
Okay, regards from the Israeli family to everybody.
Stay well and safe, everybody.
Great day. Thanks.
Bye.